In this video, we'll be taking a look at 4 NBA games happening on March 2nd, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 8 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 4 NBA games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start. If you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Houston Rockets versus Washington Wizards. Houston heads into Washington with the confidence of a team that already knows who it is, while the Wizards are still trying to figure out what they want to be. Houston sitting at 37-22, firmly in that zone where you are not just a cute story anymore, you are a real problem for the conference. They slow things down, they squeeze possessions, and they treat every trip like a little math puzzle, which is not exactly glamorous, but it wins a lot of games. Washington, on the other hand, is stuck at 16-43, and it feels like a group that would love to run before it can really walk. They want to play fast, they want to fly up and down the floor, and sometimes it looks fun, but when you mix that tempo with a leaky defense, you end up giving opponents exactly the kind of game they want. Especially when you are facing a veteran group that is perfectly fine grinding out half-court possessions and forcing you to execute over and over again. The injury picture just pushes that contrast even harder. Houston is missing important names like Fred VanVleet, Steven Adams, Jabari Smith Jr., and Jae'Sean Tate, so it is not as if they are at full strength, but they have settled into their rotation anyway. They still lean on a 37-year-old Kevin Durant as the primary closer, with Alperen Sengun acting like a hub in the middle of the floor, and somehow the machine keeps humming. That kind of continuity matters on a long road stretch, especially when you are bouncing from Orlando to Miami to Washington, living out of hotels and watching film on planes. Washington's situation is even messier. Key names like Trae Young, Anthony Davis, Alex Sarr, Cam Whitmore, and D'Angelo Russell being unavailable leaves a lot of responsibility on less proven players who are suddenly asked to be full-time creators instead of secondary pieces. That can be exciting for individual stat lines, but it is usually brutal for efficiency and late-game decision-making. You can feel it in those stretches where the Wizards hang around for a quarter or two, then 1 or 2 sloppy possessions turn into a quick avalanche. Houston has also built its record by taking care of business against weaker teams, and that is not a small detail. Good teams separate themselves by winning the games they are supposed to win. Even when the gym is half full, it is cold outside in DC, and everybody knows the home team is rebuilding. There is always a risk of a sleepy performance on a road trip, but this Rockets group has already shown that they treat those nights like work, not like a field trip. With a slow, deliberate style running directly into a shorthanded, fast but fragile opponent, this sets up like one of those professional road wins where the gap feels pretty obvious by the second half. As our first pick for this matchup, the Houston Rockets to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. The market clearly respects Washington's desire to run and push pace, and it respects Houston's offensive talent, so on paper it looks like a night where points should come in bunches. But pace and scoring are not the same thing, and this is where Houston's personality really tilts the script. Houston plays at one of the slowest tempos in the league, living near the bottom in possessions per game. They are comfortable walking the ball up, calling sets, and turning each possession into a small chess sequence. That kind of approach naturally pulls totals down because you need wild efficiency from both sides to get to a big number when you are not racking up extra trips. Their defense adds another layer, since it is strong enough to turn opponents' fast break dreams into a lot of contested jumpers and late clock heaves instead of easy transition layups. Washington wants the exact opposite. They chase tempo, they like chaos, and they lean on the idea that more possessions might help them find a rhythm. The problem is that without those missing headliners like Young, Davis, Sarr, Whitmore, and Russell, the offense loses a lot of punch. You still get the speed, but you get fewer high-level decisions and fewer players who can turn broken plays into points. So the same fast style that usually pushes games toward higher totals can actually create long dry spells when the talent is stretched thin. Houston's results this season already hint at that tension between reputation and reality. They have the kind of offense that looks scary on paper, yet the combination of slow pace and sturdy defense has often dragged their games under what people expected. Washington, by contrast, has seen more higher-scoring games, but a lot of that stems from their defense turning every opponent into a highlight reel. In a matchup like this, if the scoreboard starts to tilt one way, the game often slows even more, with long half-court possessions, bench units eating minutes, and fewer late-game fouls to stretch things out. That script usually does not help an inflated number. Honestly, it is easy to get tempted by the idea of a track meet just because one team likes to run and the other has firepower. But when you mix Houston's glacial tempo, their ability to smother possessions, and a Washington roster missing so many of its main scoring threats, the more realistic picture is a game that feels controlled rather than wild. There may be a few spurts where the pace spikes and the energy in the building picks up, but over 48 minutes, the more likely outcome is a total that lands lower than the hype. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Boston Celtics versus Milwaukee Bucks. Boston heads into Milwaukee in this one looking very much like the steady veteran walking into a gym where everyone already knows who runs pickup. This version of the Celtics is sitting near the top of the conference, and they play at a pace that feels almost stubborn, a slow, grinded-out rhythm that squeezes each possession until it squeaks. They are comfortable living in that space where the score never feels wild, but the margin quietly grows because they mix efficient scoring with defense that just keeps nudging opponents off their spots. Milwaukee, on the other side, has been living a very different story, a group fighting from the middle of the pack and trying to claw its way toward the safer side of the standings while carrying the weight of that chase every night. The big shadow over this matchup is pretty simple. Giannis Antetokounmpo is out with that calf issue, and when he is not on the floor, the entire personality of the Bucks changes. Possessions that used to flow through one unstoppable force now have to be shared, improvised, and sometimes forced, and that shows up when they hit rough patches where the offense suddenly dries up. Boston is dealing with its own headline absence with Jason Tatum sidelined by the Achilles problem, but the response has been very different. The Celtics have leaned into their depth, letting wings and guards steer the half court while bigs and role players do the dirty work on the glass and around the rim. You saw that kind of blueprint in their win over Philadelphia, a game where Neemias Queta and Nikola Vucevic punished the paint, Jaylen Brown and Derek White guided the offense, and the whole thing felt methodical rather than explosive. Milwaukee is coming off an ugly one where Chicago ran straight through them, and when a team gets hit with a huge unanswered run like that, it usually says something about consistency, shot selection, and how quickly they can reset when things start to tilt. That is where the contrast really pops. Boston has looked like a team that can absorb early punches and then slowly take control, while the Bucks can swing from hot streak to cold spell in the span of a few minutes. Books still see Boston as the clear favorite on the road here, which lines up with how both teams have been trending in terms of stability, rebounding edge, and trust in late-game execution. Strip the names off the jerseys and just think about who protects the paint better, who controls tempo more reliably, and who seems less likely to fall apart under pressure, and the matchup leans in one direction even before you talk about coaching or rotations. As our first pick for this matchup, the Boston Celtics to cover the spread as favorites is our full-game side pick. Boston plays with the slowest tempo in the league, yet still manages to pile up points efficiently, which is a strange mix until you watch them string together mature, low-mistake possessions that quietly stack on the scoreboard. Their win over Philadelphia, that 114-98 kind of scoreline, is a perfect example. The game never turned into a track meet. It just moved along at a steady pace where their defense and half-court offense did the heavy lifting. Without Tatum, they have leaned even harder into that style. Brown and White handle the creative load while the rest of the group focuses on defending, rebounding, and making sure every trip down has some structure to it. Milwaukee, without Giannis, looks like a team built around jumpers and perimeter bursts, and that can be fun, but it also means that when the shots stop falling, the offense does not have that same safety valve at the rim. They have already been outscored across the season, even with his earlier minutes baked in, and that kind of profile often pairs with totals that skew a bit lower when they run into a locked-in defense like Boston's. You saw in that rough Chicago game how quickly things can stall for the Bucks when the shots dry up. And when that happens, possessions start to stretch out, the ball sticks a little more, and both sides can get pulled into a slower rhythm almost by accident. Both teams are on the second night of a back-to-back, and that usually nudges coaches toward deeper rotations, more deliberate offensive sets, and fewer full-speed sprints up and down the floor. Boston tends to be perfectly comfortable in games that land in that steady, business-like range where the score feels controlled rather than wild, and Milwaukee's current version does not exactly scream non-stop fireworks. Given the way the Celtics like to manage tempo, the Bucks' reliance on streaky perimeter scoring without their main downhill threat, and the fatigue factor baked into this spot, the ingredients lean toward a matchup where points are earned slowly instead of flying up in bunches. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Denver Nuggets versus Utah Jazz. Denver walking into Salt Lake feels a bit like the seasoned contender visiting a team still figuring out what it wants to be. The building will be loud, it always is in Utah, but the matchup itself tilts in a very particular direction. One side has treated offense like a lab project that actually worked, turning every half-court set into something efficient and repeatable, the sort of thing coaches pause on synergy clips to show at clinics. The other side is still shuffling pieces, searching for combinations that make sense for the long haul rather than just tonight. Denver sits with the top offensive rating in the league at about 121.6, which is a fancy way of saying they squeeze a lot of value out of every trip. They are also sitting at the top of the league in three-point percentage, hovering around 39%, so when the ball swings to the corner it is more uh-oh than let them shoot. The defense, sure, has had its leaky stretches, which keeps things interesting, but even with that, they still grade out in the top 7 in net rating, so the overall picture is a team that wins the math battle over and over. You can almost feel how comfortable they are in their own skin, like a group that knows exactly where the next good look is coming from. Utah lives on the other side of that mirror right now, sitting 14th in the West at 18-42, and that record tells a story all by itself. The roster has been hit hard, with Lauri Markkanen sidelined for at least a couple of weeks by that combination of hip issue and ankle trouble, which removes the primary scorer who smooths over rough possessions. On top of that, the frontcourt depth has been chopped down, with Jaren Jackson Jr., Walker Kessler, and Jusuf Nurkic all out for the season, which is a brutal run for any team, let alone one that already needed size. So you get this group that is both smaller and younger, and you can almost see the coaching staff treating stretches of the game like live training reps. Defensively, Utah has been stuck near the bottom, sitting around a 123.5 defensive rating, which basically means opponents feel a little too comfortable for a little too long. That number tracks with what you see: late closeouts, second chance looks, soft spots in the paint, and against the #1 offense in the league that is a scary cocktail. On the other side, Denver is not a defensive buzzsaw, but they do not have to be when the talent gap, scheme comfort, and health all lean their way. Nikola Jokic running the show, with Jamal Murray healthy and putting up 25+ a night, gives them a core that understands how to press an advantage without forcing it. Meanwhile, Utah is giving runway to rookies like Ace Bailey and young guards to figure things out on the fly, which is great for development, but it rarely helps against a polished contender that still cares a lot about seeding. Recent form tilts this same way. Utah has dropped 3 straight at home, which chips away at any aura the building might create, while Denver has been grinding through games against teams they actually have to game plan for in May. There is also that extra layer of urgency for Denver, stuck in a crowded top 4 chase in the West, which nudges them toward treating nights like this as business trips rather than casual stops. Talent gap, health gap, and even the clarity of each team's direction all lean toward one side being far more likely to handle the number in this spot. As our first pick for this matchup, the Denver Nuggets to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. The expectation on this game points to a high-scoring script, the sort where you look up in the second quarter and both teams are already deep into the 30s. Oddly, that kind of projection can scare people off because a big number feels fragile, but in this particular matchup, the pieces actually line up for a track meet to feel pretty natural. The style, the personnel, and the statistical profile all lean toward a game that breathes on offense rather than clamps down. Denver does not race up and down like a pure run-and-gun team. The pace is closer to steady than frantic, but the efficiency is what blows games open. With the top offensive rating in the league sitting at that 121.6 mark and the best three-point percentage around 39%, every half-court possession carries real scoring potential. The defense ranks down around 21st with a 117-point rating, so they are not exactly putting a lid on things on the other end either. That combination, high-level shot-making on one side and a defense that is merely okay, naturally floats totals upward because runs come easy and stops come late. Utah quietly adds fuel to that fire. Even with all the injuries, they have played at an offensive level around 115 in rating, which is better than people might guess just looking at the record. The issue is that same 123.5 defensive rating, one of the worst in the league, which turns almost every opponent into a more dangerous version of itself. So you get this odd mix, a team that can score enough to keep participating, but that also invites scoring from the other bench, which is exactly how games end up in those shootout box scores where both fan bases feel exhausted. The injuries to the Jazz bigs matter a ton here too. Without Markin as a scoring release valve and without real interior size from Kessler, Nurkic, and Jackson Jr., the defense around the rim and on the glass suffers. Missed box outs, late rotations, and smaller lineups often lead to extra possessions, easy putbacks, and more open threes trailing the play. Coaches know that if you cannot slow people down with physicality, you might as well lean into tempo and let the kids run. And honestly, that is what this Utah season feels like right now. Game script possibilities still tend to push toward points. If both teams trade punches early, the rhythm can turn free-flowing, with very little incentive to slow things down. If the game tilts one-sided, the bench units that check in are often playing loose, hunting shots, and trying to earn minutes, which can keep the scoreboard moving even when the competitive edge fades a bit. Garbage time is rarely pretty, but it is often fast, and fast possessions usually mean more scoring chances, not fewer. Everything, from the analytical profile to the human element of how these rosters are built right now, nudges this matchup toward a higher scoring outcome rather than some slow half-court grind. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Los Angeles Clippers versus Golden State Warriors. Los Angeles Clippers at Golden State Warriors, set for Monday, March 2, 2026 in the evening on the West Coast. The whole setup feels like one of those spots where the number on the board tells one story, but the situation in the building tells another. The visitors come in as the small favorite, backed by that recent buzz and name value, and on paper it tracks, because Golden State is coming off a rough home blowout loss to the Lakers where they got run out of their own gym and heard about it from everyone with a microphone. They are still missing Stephen Curry with the knee issue, still missing Jimmy Butler with the torn ACL, and still without Kristaps Porzingis because of the illness tag, so the headline talent in street clothes makes the Warriors look fragile if you only skim the injury report. The funny part is that Los Angeles is not exactly walking in fully loaded either. Bradley Beal is done for the season after hip surgery, Kawhi Leonard still has not made it back from his knee and ankle problems, and the roster that sounded terrifying in theory has a lot of its star power parked on the bench in sweats. Yet the market clearly treats Golden State as the shakier group, more nervous about the depth pieces wearing blue and gold than the mix in Los Angeles, which is a bit ironic when you remember how often Warriors role players have made noise in big spots over the years. The schedule spot leans the other way too. The Clippers are on the second night of a back-to-back after a high-scoring win over New Orleans. Then they hop a flight up the coast into a building that still gets especially loud whenever a team from Los Angeles walks in. That kind of quick turnaround is not just about tired legs. It is about rhythm, routine, and how many times the coaching staff can actually tweak things between games. Fatigue from that kind of stretch, almost like climbing a long set of invisible stairs on the calendar, tends to sap jump shooting more than anything, and this Clippers team is built far more on perimeter skill than on smashing people inside. Their profile fits that idea, a capable attack that can put points up in bunches, a defense that leaks more than a true contender would like, and a slower, more methodical pace that keeps them from racing up and down for 48 minutes. Golden State, even with a bare-bones version of its offensive core, still wants to play faster than that, with a pace that tilts toward chaos compared to the visitors, and with a defense that sits in that top-tier range when it is locked in. The problem, of course, is that when Curry is out, the offense does not feel like the same brand anymore. The rating drops, the spacing looks a little more cramped, and the results in those games land on the wrong side of the win column more often than the fan base would care to admit. The way they hang around anyway is by turning these nights into long, grinding contests where every loose ball, every offensive rebound, and every closeout becomes a small fist fight. Draymond Green, with the back issue behind him and back in the mix, sets the emotional temperature, while guys like Brandon Podziemski and Guy Santos, freshly rewarded and hungry, fill in all the annoying little gaps that do not show up on an Instagram highlight. Recent shooting numbers make all of that look worse than it really is. They went 11 for 45 from 3 in that tight loss to the Pelicans and followed it with 12 for 44 in the blowout against the Lakers, so anyone scrolling a box score sees a team shooting a mountain of threes and bricking most of them. That volume still leads the league, roughly mid-40s in attempts per night, but without their signature shot maker to bail them out, it creates an ugly picture that can scare casual bettors off in a hurry. Honestly, that is often where value hides. You get the home team off an embarrassing, nationally watched no-show, with role players hearing their effort questioned, facing a travel-worn opponent whose own best scorers are still in hoodies and whose defense has not exactly been airtight all season. Both groups are fighting around that play-in range, so there is a real human edge in the building, a sense that this one matters more than a random weeknight on the schedule, and that pride game feel, while speculative, is the kind of thing that shifts how hard every possession is contested. Layer in the fact that the number swung hard away from an early view that leaned toward Golden State as the favorite and now paints Los Angeles as the side to trust, while the Clippers are still figuring out who takes command late in close games without Kawhi or Beal, and the result is the kind of small home underdog spot that quietly pays out more often than people expect. As our first pick for this matchup, the Golden State Warriors to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. The number on the board for total points looks modest at first if you picture the vintage version of the Warriors firing from deep and a Clippers offense that can rack up points, but the real context here leans toward something much closer to a playoff-style grind than a track meet. Golden State is the starting point for that. With Curry still sidelined for at least another stretch of days because of the patellofemoral pain in his knee, what used to be a fireworks show has turned into more of a survival exercise on offense. Their efficiency when he sits falls sharply from the stronger season-long range down into more pedestrian territory, and in recent games they have been stuck in the low hundreds, like the 109 against New Orleans and the 101 against the Lakers. They are still letting it fly from 3 more than 40 times a night, which looks fun on paper, but the conversion rate without that elite gravity and shot-making talent turns all that volume into a lot of long rebounds and stalled possessions. They are also missing Butler's ability to slash and live at the rim, Porzingis and his pick and pop threat above the break, and Seth Curry's scoring punch off the bench, so the rotation tilts toward defenders and energy players instead of pure scorers, and that naturally softens the ceiling for how many points they can stack up. The Clippers bring their own twist to the scoring story. On paper, they look like a pretty offense with a shaky defense, but in reality, that offense has been stitched together on the fly. Beal's hip surgery closed the book on his season, Kawhi is still unavailable, and Darius Garland sits on the injury report with that toe issue, with the general expectation that he will not suit up despite one report teasing that he might. So Los Angeles is leaning more heavily on Brook Lopez in the half-court, on whichever guards are actually healthy to manufacture something late in the shot clock, and on a style that already runs at a pace under 96 possessions per 48 minutes, which sits in the bottom part of the league. On the second night of a back-to-back, especially with a veteran-heavy group, that tempo tends to drop even more as coaches trim transition chances and try to conserve gas for the closing minutes. Put a slower, slightly worn Clippers offense together with a Warriors team that has quietly shifted into a defense-first, hope the threes fall later identity without Curry, and the picture that forms is not one of non-stop scoring. Both coaches are staring at the standings, fully aware that this feels closer to a mini playoff test than a throwaway date on the calendar, and in games like that rotations shorten, half-court sets multiply, and every empty trip suddenly feels a little heavier. The most realistic picture here looks a lot more like something in the 104 to 102 neighborhood than a 125 to 120 track meet, and that comparison, even as a rough sketch, shows how much the tempo and efficiency tilt toward a quieter scoreboard. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.